Are we ready to go?
One moment, please, Your Worship.
There's too many people that applied for it, so 90.
We are live, Your Worship.
Great, thank you. Afternoon, Council. I'd like to call this regular council meeting of July 9th, 2024 to order with adoption of the agenda. Someone want to make that motion for me? Councillor Devlin, Councillor Lusau, all in favor? Motion's carried. Adoption of the minutes of the regular council meeting of June 25th. Councillor Devlin, seconded by Councillor Lusau, all in favor? Motion's carried. And adoption of the special council minutes of June 27th. Again, Councillor Devlin, Councillor Cherry, all in favor? Motion's carried. Any business arising from the regular council meeting of June 25th? Seeing none, any business arising of the special council meeting of June 27th? Seeing none, I'm going to move on to announcements from the mayor. So I just want to let you know our community center is open 6 days a week, Mr. Nato, yes, Monday through Saturday till 7 p.m. for those who need to go somewhere to cool down. In addition, I understand the library is open as well. I'm not sure their hours. Just wanted to do a couple thank yous. Thank you to Canada Day for everyone coming out. Appreciate everyone being involved in that. And congratulations to our grads, and thank you to Councillor Orlando for taking over my duties there. I appreciate that. And I just want to mention regarding the heat, if you're out walking your animals, know that they're considered barefoot with their paws on that hot asphalt. So maybe be out early in the day or late in the evening to make sure that they're safe. And if you see an animal in a hot car, that is something that you need to call the RCMP. Don't try and break the window yourself, and it's not incumbent upon our bylaw people to come and do that. So just want to mention those things. Again, thank you to all who came out for Canada Day. I'm extremely appreciative to all the volunteers and for Megan McIsaac for leading that again. Much appreciated. We're going to move on to delegations and presentations. So we have CBT, Columbia Basin Trust. Johnny Strelaf is here. Johnny, I hope I haven't butchered your name too much, but we'll leave it to you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can everybody see and hear me okay?
You can.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Johnny Strelaf, and I have the privilege of being President and CEO of Columbia Basin Trust for those who I have not met. For several years, the Trust adopted a practice of going out to local governments to just share what had historically been called a bit of a State of the Union, share some information on activities the Columbia Basin Trust was working towards or supporting, but I think even more importantly, be available for questions. And that rhythm sort of got interrupted by COVID, and we are now just sort of stepping back into it. So I very much appreciate the opportunity to join you here today. And I have a relatively loose agenda. I would like to share a bit of information, but then leave time for any questions from council. So if it's okay, I'm going to share a screen, and I do have a short slide deck, and hopefully everybody will be able to see it. Let's just get it going here. Can I ask if that's visible?
Yes, it is.
Okay, that's great. I'm just going to put it in presentation mode here.
Okay. Good. We've got it up and running.
Terrific. Thank you. So I suspect many will be aware of a very significant strategic undertaking that has occupied much of our time as senior staff and our board for the past 2 years, and that was the renewal of our management plan. And this is a critically important document to Columbia Basin Trust. Many organizations develop strategic plans, of course. In this instance, it is even more important to CBT. Whenever we develop a program or an initiative or set out policy or structure, it really has to tie directly to our strategic plan. And by law, we can only develop that plan in consultation with Basin residents. So our board cannot just go out on their own and develop a plan, or senior staff. By the CBT Act, the law that created our organization, we're obligated to speak with Basin residents. And we started that undertaking now more than 2 years ago, traveling community to community, including, of course, Revelstoke, events in community halls, community centers, pop-up events. We held 3 large, what we call symposia in Cranbrook and in Trail and in Golden, and solicited feedback. We had more than 10,000 points of feedback from Basin residents, which is really quite extraordinary. And we use that as the basis for developing our renewed strategic plan that was ultimately approved by our board of directors this past February. The plan itself kind of focuses in 3 general areas. It sets out some guiding principles that really speak to those core beliefs that relate to CBT's identity, that will support the broader objectives in the plan. And it also identifies the different trust roles. And, for many individuals around the region, they know Columbia Basin Trust as a funder. And of course, that is a big part of the work we do. But there are many roles that CBT plays in the Columbia Basin. And I'm going to come back to this point a little bit later when I talk about our relationship with local governments. So guiding principles, our roles, and then ultimately where it is we would be focusing our efforts, again, at a strategic level over the next 10 years. And one common theme really came up across the region, and that is this theme of health and resilience, speaking to how robust we are today and making sure we are responsive into the future. And 4 areas emerged as critically important. The health and resilience of Columbia Basin Trust as an organization, and I'm going to come back to that in a moment, why it is this surfaced as being so important. The relationships that we so enjoy between the organization and residents and communities, where we live, the actual communities we live, and this natural environment that we all so enjoy and cherish in the Columbia Basin region. So these 4 pillars, if you will, legs on the stool, whichever metaphor you like, form the basis of our new strategic plan. And if that appears to be high level, it is. And it is by intent, because it's intended to be there for as much as 10 years. So over the course of the coming months, we're translating this high level strategy into action. And so 2024 is a bit of a transition year. So really the programs and initiatives that we had in place last year, they're very similar to those that we have this year as we develop a whole new suite of community supports that'll be launched in phases over time. There will be many programs that will continue largely as they have in the past. Ready Grants is an example, and I know Council will be very familiar with Ready Grants. That will continue largely as it has in the past, but there's going to be other programs launched that may be refinements to the way we have supported work in the past, but there will also be some new areas of focus that will be launched in the near term. And there'll also be a number of new focus areas or initiatives that will be developed and launched in the longer term. So we will be making public announcements in each of these categories over the coming months. And this really is part of the transition of moving from the former plan that came to an end in February and taking action on the new plan that we have now launched from the end of February forward. So that's sort of at the strategic level, what has been occupying much of Columbia Basin Trust board time. But the big machine keeps turning, and we are still continuing to work in all communities around the Columbia Basin region in a number of areas. And I've just drawn out a few highlights with linkages to Revelstoke, recreation and trails, support for trail crews, maintenance and development of new trails, business supports, both by way of wage subsidy and business advisory, a lot of work in the childcare space, both in the creation of new spaces and new childcare facilities around the region, but also funding for new equipment and supplies, and in some cases, energy efficiency upgrades. Lucky Penny is an example here from Revelstoke. Housing, of course, critically important across the region, continues to be a major focus. The 24 affordable rental homes in partnership with Revelstoke Community Housing Society is one example. Wildfire initiatives. Here we are at this time of year. We're starting to speak to the heat and drying conditions Your worship, I heard you mention that in your opening remarks. There's been a lot of work in partnership with local governments on wildfire mitigation initiatives. Outdoor recreation, Revelstoke Golf, Disc Golf Society, the creation of new outdoor recreation spaces continues to be so important across the region. As I mentioned earlier, climate, childcare, but also energy efficiency and climate-based initiatives for many of our community organizations, oftentimes working in properties that are a little bit older and or benefit from energy efficiency upgrades, or in some instances, installation of solar or other power generating technologies as well that not only benefit the climate, but reduce operating costs, pardon me, for those organizations. A couple are cited here. So I just draw those out as a few examples of the work that continues to happen as we start to transition into our new strategic plan. We are experiencing something this year that we have not experienced for some time now. And it's just a reminder to Council, Columbia Basin Trust is a self-sustaining organization. We don't receive tax revenue either directly or via the provincial or federal government. There is no rich benefactor that provides funding to the trust each year. The resources we have available to support the community work that we're able to support comes from our investments. And the largest portion of our investments are investments in 4 hydroelectric projects in the basin. And one of those projects, the Arrow Lakes Generating Station, which is on the lower Arrow Lakes, immediately adjacent to Huquinley Side Dam, we've encountered some very significant technical issues at, in fact, now both generating units. So one of the turbines there's 2 identical turbines in the generating station. One was out of service for much of last year. Fortunately, the majority of the costs and lost revenue that were realized during this outage were covered by insurance. But there are 2 identical generating units. So the issues that we identified in the first had to also be fixed in the second. And we are currently working through that today. It is possible that insurance coverage will not apply for the work and the lost revenue for the second generating unit. And should this be the case, there will be a very significant short-term impact to funding that the trust would have available in the 8-figure space. So it would be very significant. So I share this information and we're talking about it publicly, not to sound alarmist. This is not an existential threat to Columbia Basin Trust, but it is an example with these large investments that from time to time there are unplanned outages and they can result in negative impacts to revenue, and that could in the near term impact delivery of benefits. So we will know more over the coming weeks in working with our insurer as to whether or not we do have to in the near term look to make some changes to our funding support in the current year. The other point that I really wanted to draw out for Council is just a reminder that the relationship between Columbia Basin Trust and local government is critically important to our success. And as I spoke to earlier, Columbia Basin Trust benefits from playing many roles in communities, and they're exemplified in our partnership with local governments. And as identified on the top of this slide, local governments are one of our longest delivery partners with the Ready Grants partnership. Of course, local governments can be funding recipients directly on different projects in communities. In some instances, local governments have made contributions to other trust initiatives. Broadband is identified here. And there's also other ways that we have to work collaboratively with local government in order to see really great work happen in communities. And all of this is just critically important. So I just want to express my thanks and appreciation to the City of Revelstoke for the partnership that we have historically enjoyed, and I expect we'll continue to enjoy into the future, and believe it's pivotal to seeing great things happen in your community. We have a number of staff that work directly out in the region, and I encourage, if there's ever any questions or thoughts or ideas or aspirations from Council, please don't just go to our website and try to navigate and see if there's some way that you could work with us. Feel free to reach out to myself at any time or any of my other staff that are identified here on the slide. And we're happy to have a conversation to understand if there are partnership opportunities, or in many instances, be able to link in other organizations that are doing work in a particular sector that could potentially be brought to the table. Okay, I know I spoke quickly. The intent was to keep it brief and leave time for questions. So at a strategic level, we're launching our new plan. This is a transition year. A lot of work continues to happen in communities, more than 2,800 projects and 60 programs over the last year. Potential for some revenue interruption this year. It would be short term, and closing with an expression of my appreciation for the partnership with local governments, including the city of Revelstoke.
Thank you, Johnny. Appreciate it. And I'm going to ask council if there's anyone that has questions or comments that you'd like to make. So, Councilor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Souls. Thank you, Johnny. Very informative and good to have an update again. Can you hear me all right?
Sure can, yes.
Okay. A couple questions. One, you had the list of liaisons. Who's the community liaison that's most related to Revelstoke?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I hope I don't sound coy with my answer. I'm hoping you could hang in there with me for about one more week. We historically have had 3 community liaisons covering the entire basin region. So that's geography the size of Austria. We are hiring 2 new liaisons, and one is actually onboarding right now, and a second will be a little bit in the future. And we are just redrafting their geographic areas of responsibility, and we will have that firmed up here in about the next week.
Great, thank you. Look forward to hearing who it is. A question regarding BC Hydro and your relationship with them. Specifically, I had a person that went through the tour of the dam, and I'm getting it secondhand, so I won't repeat the information, but it sounded like some of the information regarding the history was maybe not entirely accurate. And I'm just wondering if you are directly involved with BC Hydro on their communications and their outreach through the tours. And you don't necessarily have to answer. It's maybe just a piece of information that it's kind of timely right now you're here.
Yes, so we certainly do have a relationship with BC Hydro at different levels in different parts of our business. In terms of information they may be sharing as part of their tour operations, I don't believe they've passed something by us to sort of fact check, if you will, information they might be sharing. So I'm not really certain whether the specific example you're citing was accurate or inaccurate. As far as I'm aware, they've never approached us to share what they in turn share with tour participants.
And through the mayor, yeah, so maybe just an idea, I'm not sure which staff would be appropriate, but maybe there's a component of training for their tour people regarding the Columbia Basin Trust. It might be help augment the quality of their tour. The other question, you talked about the Arrow Lakes generating station, and I have been in there. It's been a long time ago, but I remembered it as soon as I saw the picture. What's the percentage? Also, you talked about potentially 8 figures, and that's 8 figures can be a pretty big span. But I'm wondering what percentage of that asset is Columbia Basin Trust? Is it entire or is it a portion? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So it's 50%. And that's the case for each of the 4 projects that we're invested in. 50% is owned by Columbia Basin Trust, and 50% is owned by the province of BC by way of their crown, Columbia Power Corporation.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions from council? Seeing none, thank you again, Johnny. Appreciate the presentation and the time you spent with us. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Enjoy your meeting.
Take care. Thanks. All right, council, we're gonna move on to item 11A, staff reports, development permit amendments for BC Housing. Nice to see this coming forward. Ms. Hartling, do you have an overview for us?
Yes, I just have a brief presentation showing some of the plans for visuals. Let's bring it up here. Right, you can see that there.
We can. Thank
All
you.
right, so the development permit in front of you is an amendment to DP 2022-017. So this brought to council in 2022 for the 420 Downing Street property for BC Housing rental housing project. So what you have in front of you here is you'll see lot 1, lot 2, and lot 3 accessed off of Edward Street, 4th Street, and Downing Street. Lot 1 was approved, and BC Housing has applied to amend the permit with Lot 1, Building 1 to include Phase 2 and Phase 3 with Building 2 and 3. So it's a comprehensive development plan all included into one permit. So what you see here is Phase 1 on the right. That's the approved original development permit. So you have access off of Edward Street to Phase 1, Building 1, internal pedestrian access, surrounded by landscaping, a pocket park off of 4th Street between Phase 1 and Phase 2. You'll see on the left-hand side of the screen, Phase 2. So there's pedestrian access to the proposed townhomes, which are 2 stories, and it steps back to 4 stories for apartment building. So this is very similar to Phase 1 that was previously approved. For Phase 2, Phase 3, similar look of buildings, access by pedestrian access to the townhomes, and then internal parking within the complex that's screened. And then also there is parkades as well. So you'll see with Phase 2, it's all residential units. Phase 3, there is a proposed expansion of the childcare amenity. So there's a daycare there with an outdoor childcare area, and then a pocket park next to that. And then up north or down Downing Street is a site access for pedestrian and vehicle access. And the next slide here, I think I have the pedestrian movements. So you see Phase 1, Phase 2, and 3 added to the permit. Red is the pedestrian circulation throughout the site. So access is throughout the entire perimeter of the site with internal accesses, and then vehicle circulation is shown in the blue, which is access from 4th Street, or sorry, Edward Street and Downing Street for vehicle access. These are just showing a comparison of the renderings. So Phase 1 is on the right there, what was previously approved. You'll see that Phase 2 and 3 are the same materials used for all 3 buildings. Same heights with the CD zone. Everything meets parcel coverage, floor area ratio, everything to the CD zone that was created specifically for this property. And you'll just see a few more renderings of Phase 2 and 3 on the right or the left-hand corner. You'll just see the exterior for the daycare facility, and then sidewalk pedestrian access throughout the site. There is also, to go back up to this slide, you'll see a pocket park to the right of Phase 3 building, and that's between Phase 3 and other single-family residential properties, creating a bigger buffer with those properties. So those are the slides for council today, with staff recommendation. I can bring up any of the other maps and plans that were attached with the package if you're wanting to see anything else. What we are looking at today is a form and character development permit. It's for the scenic corridor multifamily mixed-use residential development permit areas for the construction of 3 multifamily residential mixed-use buildings containing an apartment and row house dwelling units and a child care facility. And then that the owner provides security for the landscaping. And this was also secured by a letter of indemnity from BC Housing, just like with the original phase 1.
Great, thank you, Ms. Hartling. So just for clarification, this amendment is because we're now putting phase 2 and 3, tying it to phase 1. And today it's form and character that's before us. And my understanding is the daycare that they're putting in is a little bigger now than what they originally planned, but that is just included in their plans now. So.
Yes, that's correct, Your Worship. And BC Housing, we do have a representative online for any questions about the development permit application. But yeah, it's including phase 2 and 3 all into one permit, which the applicant is planning to start construction next spring. So with this development permit issued, all phases can start to happen.
Perfect. Good to hear that all phases are going to happen. I'd love to see them do it this fall. But not like putting pressure on BC Housing, right? Anyway, council, any comments or questions from Ms. Hartling? Council Palmer?
Perhaps I'll put the motion
That'd be
on the table.
Sure.
Then I have to have questions. So recommendation that development permit amendment DP 2022-017 be issued for form and character, the construction of 3 multifamily residence mixed-use buildings containing apartment and row housing dwelling units and a child care facility at 420 Downing Street. And the legal as written.
Legal description is there as well. Second for the motion, Council Lucelle. You want to weigh in a little further, Council Palmer?
Again, I think share the excitement with the community and council on this moving ahead. I have 2 questions. The first is on 4th Street calming. So engineering's been working on 4th Street calming and transportation things. And there was some issues before that became formalized on opportunities in front of the building. And I just was wondering if there was any comments from engineering, but I don't believe they're here as such regarding the traffic calming and sort of the motivation behind my question is I just see opportunity for that would improve the quality for the residents there rather than this sort of what I would consider a somewhat antiquated street front development. Yeah, so that's my question. I sort of suspect there's not an answer right now.
Yeah. Ms. Hartling, do you want to weigh in a little bit on that?
I can weigh in a little bit. You're correct, there's no one here from engineering to answer that, but I do have some information, and the Director of Development Services may as well. There's, with the transportation impact assessment that was done for this property, there was discussion of the Downing Street access onto 4th with that pedestrian light, moving to Edward Street and 4th to control pedestrian access that's heavier there. There's also discussions of potentially having a full traffic light for vehicles as well there. So there's ongoing discussions with engineering and the applicant that will get fine-tuned at building permit stage when they do the frontage improvements and works and services. I'm not sure if there's any other comments. I know that this is being worked on and the 4th Street calming is being worked on, so it's not like it's gonna, if there's issues that need to be addressed, it will be addressed at the time with them working on this project through the building permit, because the frontage improvements will be planned in accordance with that project, but I'm not too sure if anyone else has anything to say.
Mr. Simon, thank you for being here today. Do you care to weigh in on that?
For your worship, Councilor Palmer, nothing really too much more to add than what Ms. Hartling said. But yes, we have been working on this for quite some time. We have been in close conversations with engineering, making sure that this does intertwine with any improvements that are going to happen on 4th Street. And one of the benefits of moving the pedestrian only light from Downey and 4th to Edward and 4th is it would help also break up the flow of traffic into the roundabout that was recently constructed. So it would definitely provide some further calming. And even if it does only start as a pedestrian only signal, it still would give us the ability in the future to upgrade it to a fully signalized intersection. So that will be part of, as Ms. Hartley indicated, the building permit works and services discussion that is currently ongoing in the background right now.
Thank you. Follow-up, Councilor?
Yeah, just through to the mayor and just sort of an indicator or whatever. I would really hope that this becomes a priority in the engineering department. It's been on the table for quite a while, and I would hate to see it as a little hiccup as we go, get down to that stage. Anyway, this might actually be helpful to see that there is a larger number that's closer to reality. So that's good. I do have a second question, Mayor Soul.
Sure.
So I can't remember exactly when, but with the province in the discussion regarding the name 420 Downing Street, it may be a non-issue, but having been brought up in subsidized housing, names are important and can create a stigma. It was certainly an indication, but no resolution at the time that name 420 Downey, there's a double component to that. And I don't, not really wanting to flag it, but it's a reality, and it may not come to pass, but I would just really hate to see a stigma attached because of the name.
And I don't disagree with you. I think they're using that name temporarily because of the address. There's no reason we can't have that address changed to either a 4th Street address or an address on Edward Street to get rid of that name. I'm hearing what you're saying on that.
Yeah,
And that's something that we can definitely have discussions with BC Housing on that.
Yeah.
Well, Ms. Hartling, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, we do have an addressing policy. So when we get building permits or subdivisions, we do have preliminary addressing we give, and then once it's developed, we assign it by unit numbers, if it's row housing, or if it's apartment buildings, there's different types of addressing we do, whether it's a unit or a house number address for row homes. And it is addressed, we refer it out to emergency purposes. So whatever makes sense for emergency access, and where the main access is where we'd address it. So likely you'll see readdressing on this property.
So Mayor Soul, so what you explained, what was explained is, it was with the previous council. It's almost verbatim. So maybe after this is, we get the first and second part completed, I might put a resolution on the table to formalize the change.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other comments from council regarding the motion on the table? Councilor Chair.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm just looking for some clarification. Under the executive summary, it says that, council issued DP phase 1 in September 27, 2022. The proponent has since submitted their plans for phase 2 and 3, amending the proposal to remove the commercial space from phase 1 and increase the size of the childcare in phase 3. I was just looking for clarification on what changes are happening on each phase of the commercial space. Just because I find this a little confusing, if I can, through the chair.
Sure. Ms. Hartling, comment?
Yeah, through your worship, I can understand the confusion. The plans and everything that's confirmed with BC Housing are to remain consistent. So the look of the building of phase 1 has not changed. There may be an opportunity to have commercial space there, but with their plans and model, they've removed it to increase the size of the commercial space for the daycare. So what you might see put into that space is like 1 or 2 apartment units potentially. The CD zone is quite flexible with what could go in there. So that is something that they have noted that may likely be removed from that section of the building.
In which phase?
Phase 1, sorry. Yeah.
Thank you.
But the exterior is to stay the same.
Okay, well, thanks. If I can just make one comment.
Sure.
happy to see this finally progressing. It's been a long time coming. I think everybody on council feels the same way. I do have one item about this project I find a bit disappointing, is that the plans currently show the buildings to be constructed to meet step code 3, this being the minimal energy, the minimal standard of energy efficiency. And I feel this is a missed opportunity for the province of BC Housing to be a leader in the energy efficiency building practices.
Okay, thanks for the comment. Any other comments or questions from council? Councilor Staplenhurst.
Hey, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, thank you.
Okay, so I have maybe two questions. I understand that this is right now is for form and character. And so I'm not sure if right now would be time to discuss my concerns regarding the parking stalls and the 25 bicycle stalls. I'm gonna ask Ms. Hartling if this is, when we're looking at the form and character for this development project, is this the time to be discussing the parking and the lack of bicycle stalls that are currently proposed?
Ms. Hartling?
Through your worship, yep, bicycle stalls, parking is all part of the site design for the form and character development excuse me, permit. What the applicants proposed is the minimum requirement for bike parking. So if there is any comments from council, that's something that you can comment on.
So I guess overall, my comment is, in the proposal as written, it's showing 25 bicycle stalls. I think that's grossly inadequate in my opinion. And I'd love to see more. So maybe just some other comments really quickly is, like this, the step code 3, I think, and again, if this isn't time to discuss it because this is form and character, please let me know. The step code 3 as it's proposed right now, I think it would be better to make that a step code 5. And I think the reason for that being is that it would help the residents in the long term with their heating and cooling costs. I have other concerns in regards to the landscaping. In the landscaping plans, it's showing some grass coverage, which I don't think is necessarily the best choice environmentally. I think it's a high maintenance cost. I don't think it's necessarily user friendly. And I think there's an environmental impact there as well as fire smart. And then there's also, I have concerns about the dog runs and this development having dogs on site as well as the childcare, and the potential for the proponent to have increased insurance liability and the potentials of those consequences. And then just the other concern that I have is or concern and comment is when I look at first off, I'm really grateful that BC Housing is investing in housing in Revelstoke. And when I look at the other development projects that they are operating, such as 1949 LaForme Drive, my question to staff and to the proponent is now the time to discuss this being the scenic corridor to the resort. My fear is that without some proper communication, some clear tenancy addendums, what are we doing to ensure that this is not becomes an unsightly premise? What are we doing to prevent the balconies from collecting storage from I mean, I can go into greater detail of what my concerns are if it's unclear. Laundry hanging off the balcony, making privacy screens out of empty beer cans. What are we doing to ensure that? And then maybe lastly, my other question would be, if you went back to the 2 phases for development, so I could see it on my screen, please, that'd be great. There was the childcare playground. What is that? The outdoor childcare amenity. I think that is going to be a huge heat sink, given the fact that it is. Yeah, I think it's going to be like a cat on a hot tin roof for those kids playing in that playground with no shade. So those are my comments and questions, and let me know if you need any clarity on that. I apologize. I've got a few things going on in the background that are slightly distracting.
Thanks for the comments. Ms. Hartland, do you want to weigh in on any of those things at this point? That a lot of that doesn't come into form and character, more of a management issue with some of that stuff, but.
Yes,
go
for your
ahead.
worship, I would say a lot of those comments are to do with management of the site. The building code is what's submitted with the building permit application and assessed to meet our bylaws. So it is applicant driven with what code they're applying. It can definitely be recommended to look at having a step code 4 or 5. However, if it does meet our bylaws, that's how staff would be reviewing it against that. But it's also something that you can definitely recommend with the operation of the site. That it is, you're correct, it's not what's being looked at today with the development permit for form and character. Those are all comments that would be addressed with just with any rental building, the owner of the building who's managing it, or say you have an owner, if it was, say it was sold, it's the owner of the property. So those are all either operator issues or owner issues that I'm not going to comment on through this because it's for form and character. If you'd like to ask the applicant any of those questions, they are online. Moving into the outdoor childcare amenity, those are comments that the applicant could take into consideration if there's any of those sail shades or anything like that for the childcare area. If there is too much heat, the playground has not been fully designed out as for specifications, so that is something of a concern that could be looked at.
All right, okay, thank you. Councillor Stapeners, do you follow up?
No, thank you, Your Worship. Appreciate it.
Okay. Ms. Jerry, you're with BC Housing. Do you have any comments on what you've heard around the council table?
Hi, yes, thanks so much. We, on behalf of BC Housing, we're really excited to have this opportunity to invest in the city of Revelstoke and appreciate you taking the time to look at our application today. Some of the comments I heard, particularly, I'll sort of address that which I've heard, and you can feel free to pose further questions. As it relates to the STEP code, a significant investment is being put forth under a new program called the Provincial Redevelopment Program that focuses primarily on adding supply to households and rental stock for all residents of BC. As such, the program does not run on continual operating subsidies and receives a significant equity contribution at the beginning of the project in order to make the financing work. This grant is sort of pre-approved through multiple levels of government and across ministries. And as such, in conjunction with the BC building guidelines and an updated technical bulletin that was published in November in 2023, because we're in climate zone 6 and there's a certain metric that has to do with the degree of heating days that this area is allocated in, step code 3 is what is proposed for this, with a GHGI, which is sort of like a CO2 metric of meters squares per year of 6. So we are designing the project to be in line with the BC Housing Guidelines, which is essentially a metric for how we choose to invest in buildings in alignment with a lot of other data that has to do with future climate change and future proofing and being aware of what may be vulnerable tenants in any of our buildings. As it relates to design for landscape and sort of some access points, that the landscape plans are not entirely finalized. Again, this is sort of a form and character where that can be further ratified at subsequent stages of development. We appreciate your concern and appreciate the feedback on the outdoor childcare space. We initially had designed that space in conjunction with the Ministry of Education and Childcare. Again, brand new ministry, brand new sort of design guidelines that we're still sort of working through. We've been going back and forth with them to ensure that the childcare space, which is why it was actually moved from building 1 over to building 3, worked best for what they deem to be a future operator. They're absolutely the experts in how childcares can be run, operated, and optimized. So So that sort of explains why sort of the commercial space was moved over to another area of the site. It was going to be better and safer for kids and operators to sort of maintain flow of traffic going in and outside for play spaces, and for the operator to sort of have eyes on the children. It just ended up working better. We absolutely hear that it could potentially become too warm, and we can take into consideration adding additional shade and whatever would work best for the kids. Again, it's sort of just a preliminary shell. Once a childcare operator is brought on board, then we can sort of further refine the design and work with ministry to ensure that that space is sort of optimized for the 49 children that hopefully will be enjoying it.
Great, thank you for your comments. I'm going to ask one more time, go around the table, Councillor Lucille and then Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Rochelle. Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Councillor Sapner said around bicycle parking spaces. I think as we try to encourage more people to be riding their bikes, 25 spaces isn't necessarily going to accommodate all of the units. With the usable open space, in the report it says it's exceeding the minimum requirements. Is there a possibility for the landscaping along phase 3 with the adjacent properties for that to be turned into covered bicycle storage, as well as offering charging stations for e-bikes?
Ms. Jerry, or I'll go, Ms. Hartling, I'll go to you first. I know we're in form and character, but I'm going to ask.
Through your worship, that is actually proposed as community garden area currently. If the applicant wishes to utilize it and put bike parking stalls there, that would still be in line with their development permit. So that would be comments that I'm not sure if the applicant wishes to comment on, but currently it's slated for a community garden area.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to see that be something that's considered with the adjacent properties being so far away. I understand the need for the green space, but I think having bicycle storage would be beneficial for the residents of these units.
Okay, thanks for your comment. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Souls, and thank you to councillors for comments. I think there's some really good points. Some of these were brought up with the previous council in the development permit that I think was again with the previous. And it's interesting hearing similar things. I'm concurring with some of those ideas regarding the bicycle storage, the childcare space. And I think with the applicant here, that's something that could take a harder look, because I'm even looking at the outdoor amenity space adjacent to the childcare. Is there an opportunity for partially shared use where there's amenity space? Again, I'm not wanting to go down the path of providing direction, but I think if the applicant was to look at those a little bit more creatively and not prescriptively, that might be helpful. Again, with the community gardens amenity, it's a really nice idea and tends to be a trendy idea. The reality of community gardens is, from my experience, more often than not, they're not fully utilized. And so for the residents, having bicycle storage might be a priority, or an area that's flexible according to the demands of the time. Just a further comment regarding when we received public feedback, the fenced dog area was an issue that was raised by some members of the public, and was opposed to that for other reasons than what has been mentioned. And then my final point, it's probably down the path, and we don't want to slow this project down. However, I do concur with Councillor Stephenhurst regarding, what this development looks like from the street front, and how this could be a better opportunity, including multi-use paths on adjacent to 4th Avenue. And one thing that I would say, if there's some creative ideas that need to use some space that's on city property, I certainly would be open to those opportunities and how we better use the space in a shared way. Thank you, Mayor Simpson.
Any further to Mr. Parliament?
Thank you. Quick question to Robin and maybe to Taha. Speaking of creative solutions, have we given consideration before we inch closer to final design on bioheat and using green energy to heat these buildings? Whether it's an on-site system or an expansion of a current system. I'm not sure if you're aware, Robin, but we run a utility within the city using wood waste from the local mill to heat buildings. Is this something that BC Housing is aware of? And I'm just bringing it up so it's not forgotten when it's too late, when the final design goes ahead and RFPs are issued and construction starts.
Ms. Jerry, comment?
Hi, thanks so much for your question, Counselor. I believe BC Housing is aware of sort of district utility and district energy systems as an option with which to incorporate further sustainability measures into our development. Challenges with that can have to do with elements of our procurement process and how energy is sort of distributed to some of our buildings, and sort of in contrast with some of our procurement requirements for public tender, depending on the size of the investment. Furthermore, we have designed this building to be within the BC Housing guidelines and a particular energy step code. Further sustainability measures like that typically add additional cost, given that we are near the maximum contribution for our program. To add further design cost and time to this project would result most likely in some elements of redesign. So I don't believe that's been incorporated yet. I do know that we are considering elements of partial cooling, and that would be heat pumps, which is effectively considered a sort of a low energy alternative heat and cooling source. So in that respect, we could definitely take a further look at it through subsequent levels of design, and it would also come down to our CHS and our proponent as to how they would like to consider the operations of their building, given that it's going to be their asset and in the community for the foreseeable future. Thanks so much for your question.
Follow up, Mr. Parliament? No. Councillor Stakenhurst, do you have a comment?
No, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Cherry.
Thanks, Mayor Stalls. I just have one question regarding parking. I know it's been explained before, but I was hoping we could get another explanation just because the community has been asking about it. There is proposed, oh, I lost the number. Sorry, there's 160 units proposed. I'm getting three different numbers here, guys.
Ms. Hartling, do you want to weigh in on the number of
67
spaces?
parade stalls?
Yes, how many parkade stalls are there? How many visitor parking? And if we can, through the proponent, get a reason on how they come up with that figure as being an adequate number. I know it was explained to us before, but just as an update for everybody in the community who's asking.
Yeah, I can just have the comprehensive development zone is very specific to this development. So the permitted uses, secondary uses permitted. We have off-street parking in a different section of our bylaw, but specific for this development with the rezoning was they did a traffic impact assessment and site analysis. So they have proposed uses that are with the minimum parking requirement. So the applicant took these statistics and applied it to their modeling. So you have bike parking, which answers that question, is 0.15 bike stalls per dwelling unit. No loading stalls are required. So visitor parking is 5% of the total minimum parking requirements for each residential use is provided. So the applicant has met the parking requirements, or gone above the parking requirements actually, and met the bike parking requirements for apartment building, row housing, and commercial.
That's your question, Council.
It does. The only part it doesn't answer is how we came up with those numbers.
I may have to defer to the Director of Development Services with the original rezoning application, is when those were developed in 2020. And that was through all of the site analysis that was done and completed with that application. Just see if he has any comments.
Mr. Simon?
Through your worship, Councillor Cherry, so the numbers equate to roughly one parking stall per unit, and it's a sliding scale based on the anticipated size of the unit. So a bachelor unit is only gonna need 0.6 stalls per unit, and then a 3-bedroom unit is gonna need 1.2 stalls, and a townhome is gonna need 1.5, et cetera. So you can see how it was developed as a sliding scale. The CD zone had parking requirements specifically embedded in it because our existing parking requirements within the zoning bylaw didn't give any allowances for non-market housing reduction. So this gives non-market housing reduction specifically embedded right within the CD zone. And again, equating to about that 1 parking space per unit, which there's a lot of research showing that 1 parking space per unit is usually suitable for non-market housing, where demand for vehicles is typically a little bit less. And also looking at this specific area, is it within our most walkable part of the community, aside from if you're right on the outskirts of the downtown core. There's a grocery store right across the street with some minor pharmaceutical amenities that are available there. So, you know, and one other piece that is important is when you look at the OCP, this whole area around it is designated as mixed use, so it will become a little bit more of a hub as development does occur over time. So the walkability score for this area is quite significant, and that's how we landed on about 1 parking space per unit.
Perfect. I appreciate that answer. And it's something that's everybody around this table is going to have to push out to the public as we get these sort of comments.
Good, appreciate it. All right, ask for one more time. Councillor Orlando, you have something?
Your worship, yeah, just a quick question, if I may, of Jerry from BC Housing. I'm just trying to follow up on a comment you made earlier, just to see if I can, just for clarification. It's my understanding that the childcare facility, the requirements for that facility, once the details are more known, are really up to another ministry to lay out things like the what needs to be adjacent to it, the playground space outside, and that some of the you know the details such as right next to the childcare facility or other things related to that will change once those requirements, once the final tenancy is being decided and the ages of the childcare facility, et cetera, is being decided. Is that a correct understanding?
Ms. Jerry?
Sorry, could you perhaps reframe that in one sentence?
Sure, yeah. How much will change once the final childcare facility and requirements are decided in terms of the on the ground detailed landscaping around the facility?
I believe that landscape finalization will happen at a subsequent stage, which is at building permits. So landscaping around the childcare will be developed and spoken with in partnership with the Ministry of Education and Childcare, RCHS, our current operators, BC Housing, and then potentially a future childcare operator as well. So in terms of the amount with which it will change, I can't speak to that specifically because that's going to be a decision that's going to be made across ministries. That said, whatever decisions are made will be something that the city will have an opportunity with which to review at a subsequent design stage.
Thank you.
Good. All right, I'm going to call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? No, motion has passed. Thank you. Moving on to item number 2. Someone want to put that motion on the table? Councillor Palmer?
That the owner provides security for due and proper completion of landscaping in the amount of 125% of the amount identified in the cost estimate to the city of Revelstoke in form of cash or unconditional, irrevocable, auto-renewing letter of credit issued by Canadian Chartered Bank or credit union prior to issuance of a building permit.
And a letter of indemnity from BC Housing.
Yes.
May be accepted. All right, seconder for the motion, Councillor Orlando. Any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you.
Mayor Schultz, I'd like to put another motion on the table, if I may, for starting this. It's not directly related to the development permit or the former character. However, I'll put a motion that Block 1, 2, 3, Section 26, Township 23, Range 2, west of 6 Merindian, Kootenai District Plan, EPP 131998, PID 032-071-035 /032-071-033/032-071-051 be changed. The civic address be changed to a 4th Avenue address.
4th Street.
4th Street address.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that motion? Councilor Devlin, and
I'll speak to
and if you want to speak to it, and
Yeah.
then I'm going to go I'm going to ask planning, but go ahead.
Based on, I've been thinking about this every time I hear the current name, which I would really like to see disappear. Based on the comments from the planner, regarding emergency services and an important component of the address, 4th Street, I think it's arguably a more appropriate address for emergency services. The timing of this is important to get this done, so it gets entrenched. And so I've heard the confidence, years ago now, I guess, hearing it again. So I think now's the time to proceed with that. If there's any sort of problems with this, I'm sure staff will get back to us.
Sure. It usually comes down to the fire department saying, hey, this is what the address is going to be. Any comment from planning department regarding that before I call a question?
Through your worship, emergency services usually for a development like this will require a sign at the entrance of the site that shows all 3 buildings and the units. So when they're entering it, when they do any of their trial runs doing that, they know where all the units are and how they're located. If it's off of 4th Street, that's something we would circulate to agencies and internal departments. And if there's any comments at that time, if there's issues with 4th Street, it would be noted then. I can't speak for fire services if that makes the most sense or not from their access, but if that's what it's addressed, off of 4th Street with the 3 buildings with unit numbers, I'm sure they'll be able to find it, but yeah, it's a bit ahead of, we usually decide that building permit.
Perfect. Okay, I'll go to Councilor Lando and Councilor Cherry.
I just a question through the chair, I guess of staff. Would it be a bit easier to and perhaps a friendly amendment to Councilor Palmer? Would it be a bit easier to not restrict it to a 4th Street address, but just a different one at whatever works for emergency services?
So as the mover of it, I thought that through, and if it's what it takes to get this moving ahead, I thought that through. But I would be happy to do that with the consent of the seconder to leave it to a different address, civic address.
Works for me.
Okay.
If I could make a comment before you guys change your mind.
All right.
Just something to consider is there is no vehicle entryways off of 4, so both for anybody looking for directions as well as emergency management, emergency staff trying to get in there. I think having a 4th Street address may add an extra layer of confusion or opportunity for confusion in a time of a crisis versus the streets the vehicle access is off of.
So duly noted, the friendly amendment addresses that.
Okay, good. So, Ms. Delaselle, is that clear to you with this new amendment on that motion?
Yes, it is, your worship. Thank you.
All right, I am, Councilor Lando, you got one more comment?
Mr. Simon has hand up.
Mr. Simon, you have your hand up, I'm sorry.
Through your worship, I think maybe just some clarity, is council looking for the address to be changed right now and then again as the building permit goes through the process of its occupancy? Because we always assign addresses at final occupancy stage, or rather prior to final occupancy, and we have a full process we go through where we refer it out, candidate post, tell us all the different service providers. And I just want to understand, because we're going to have 167 units here that will require individual addresses once we get to that building permit stage. And is council looking for us to kind of change it? I see, it's sandwiched between 722 and 900 4th Street to call it, 780 4th Street right now, and then the whole thing's going to get changed again at building permit? Or are we looking to assign final addresses based on those 167 units right now? I guess just that clarity.
I'm gonna make comment, then I'm gonna go to Councilor Palmer and the mover. We want 420 to disappear. I don't think I can be clearer than that. Even if we gave this a name, but I'm gonna go back to Councilor Palmer because it was his motion. If we gave this project a name, whatever, the Big B school project or, something like that. But I'm going to go back to Councilor Palmer because it was his motion.
Thank you, Mayor Souls. And just a response to that, I think with the more general motion as it is on the table right now. Staff can look at what's appropriate for an immediate change. If we get into questions whether lots 1, 2, and 3 are going to be separate addresses and all that kind of stuff, I think if staff just takes a look at it, well, where is this going to go? And then we would be supportive of whatever that looks like.
Is that clarity for you?
Certainly, there shouldn't be any issue with changing it right now, but just one thing, and it might be worth double checking with BC Housing. I know there's been a lot of branding and communication out to the public, and 420 Downey is quite known now. So if we call it now 784th Street, just there might be some confusion, so just wanted to flag that. But rest assured, staff are aware that the address is an issue, and if we got to change our process a little bit and change it in advance of building permits getting occupancy, there shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, before I call a question on this motion, Ms. Jerry, do you have any comment from BC Housing's perspective?
No further comment from BC Housing. We hear the concerns from council and we'll be sure to do our best to sort of address that, both with our communications team and with our CHS and our future operator. All that said, we are elated to have this opportunity to continue to move the project forward and very excited to continue to invest in the city of Revelstoke. We know that both the daycare and the housing is going to be such a wonderful addition to the city and its economy, and we appreciate council taking the time to review our application today.
Great, thank you, Ms. Jerry. Appreciate those comments. Councillor Palmer?
Thank you, Mayor Souls, and I know it's speeding this a little bit, but it's important. And the branding specific is the issue. This is the wrong branding, and so now is the time to get this done, to get that brand, make it disappear. And the importance for people living in subsidized or social housing kind of things, it's really important. And so every time I've heard this name for the last couple of years since I've had the same assurances, I have that childhood cringe that occurs. And that's what I'm trying to avoid for some future person. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And yeah, I appreciate where you're coming from with that and understanding it. I'm going to call a question on the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? No, motion is carried. Thank you. We're now going to move on to Community Works Fund, the gas tax agreement. Ms. Floyd, do you have comments on this?
Thank you, Mayor Sauls. So the 2014 to 2024 gas tax agreement expires, and UBCM just sent us a new agreement. Part of that agreement included the requirement for a resolution of council for the mayor and corporate officer to sign. The city will receive $220,102 in 2 equal payments. They've expanded the eligible expenditures, and most of the funds have been dedicated in the 2025 to 2038 long-term financial plan.
Great. All right. Thank you. Someone want to put the motion on the table? Councillor Cherry.
I move that mayor and corporate officer be authorized to sign the 2024-34 Community Works Fund agreement on behalf of the city of Revelstoke.
Second for the motion, please. Councillor Devlin. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to 12A correspondence. We received a letter from the Revelstoke Pickleball Club, request for additional courts. I'd like to refer that to staff for their input. Are you okay with that, Ms. Donato, if we refer it to you? Any comments from council? Councillor Palmer?
I'll put that motion on the table.
Okay. Seconder for the motion, please. Councillor Cherry. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. We'll leave that to you, Ms. Donato. Item 12B, Wild Site Revelstoke, follow up to Revelstoke Community Forest Corporation field trip. We had Councillor Palmer, Councillor Cherry, and myself out on that field trip, along with a couple of members of the board and management from RCFC. Before I make a statement, any comment, Councillor Palmer, Councillor Cherry?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Souls. It was a very insightful tour for me. I was actually very pleased with some of the things I heard, and some things there was concerns, but it was very, very good, educational. And so thanks to WildSite for spurring that on, and thanks to the community forest personnel for making that happen. And I do have a proposed motion. I'll hold off for a minute, but just to refer the letter to the environmental committee for their input. I think this is an important part of our community, and be valuable to have their input.
Okay, and I'll weigh in before we do that motion. Councillor Chu.
Happy to be invited to this, and looking forward to the ongoing conversations and working with both WildSite and RCFC in the future. I think it was very educational for all parties involved.
Great, appreciate that. So the reason for taking WildSite out is they were concerned about us having to remove, I believe, up to 5 trees for roadway and whatnot, and quite concerned about what they call fragmentation. RCFC is a wholly owned subsidiary of the city of Revelstoke. It is run by a board, is managed by people who work for the board, and everything to do with RCFC is done through the board level. It's not a council decision. I want to make that comment before a motion is put forward. I understand now that they have moved forward with their moving forward with their cutting. They were able to reduce that cut from 5 trees to 3 trees, and make a pretty good pathway through for skidding. Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Souls. So I'll make a motion, and I might need just a little bit of help from the corporate officer, because I do want it to be a debatable motion, so that the letter from WildSite be shared with the environmental committee for their input regarding environmental concerns. I think that stops it. Debatable, and I'd like to speak to the motion if we get a second.
So seconded for that motion. Councillor Lucille.
Thank you, Mayor Souls. There's lots of really important things that we're mandated as a council to address regarding our community. And so whether that's, the social components, housing components, the plethora of other things, parks and recreation, on and on it goes. Environment is a big part of that as well. And I think it's important that we listen to the concerns of the community. Environmental aspects are very, very important and need to be considered in other activities that we do. Your point regarding the corporation being arm's length in theory, and having independent decision-making is true. However, this is a wholly owned corporation of the city of Revelstoke. Furthermore, there's essentially a quorum of council at that committee. And so we can start splitting hairs on that, but it's important. Furthermore, I've heard it's actually been an ongoing concern, expressions of concern regarding the environmental committee of not having real input to council. We very, very rarely hear of any recommendations coming from them, and all I hear is a frustration. I think we need to take our environmental committee and the people that have appointed to look into this in a deeper way seriously, and not to just say this is just a little thing that, you're not important kind of thing. So I think this is an important motion and important for it to go to the environmental committee. Thank you.
Points taken. I'm going to vote not in favor of this. Also, Community Forest Corporation has bought Tree Farm License 56 and is operating under the Forest Code, and have been given the opportunity to cut If they don't do their cutting, then they're fine. They're setting precedent, or CFC sets precedent with how they do their logging and some of their new ways of doing it. And basically, you saw quite some of the stuff that they do as far as thinning and going in and harvesting in that way. And I believe that they're setting precedent. However, I don't disagree with the environmental people having the ability to weigh in on things that may not pertain to a tree farm license in the way it's operated under the Forest Code. However, that's my statement. And I will ask if there's any other councillors. Councillor Stapenhurst, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, thank you. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so I just wanted to share the concerns that Councillor Palmer has echoed in council chambers today. I don't feel as though the environmental advisory, which I'm the appointed rep, I don't believe that we're effective. I believe that the bandwidth for that environmental committee is a little depleted at this moment. And I would urge the discussion or prioritize the discussion of how do we reinvigorate that committee so we can be effective and we can address the concerns that we are hearing from throughout the community. One possibility would be amalgamating the Public Infrastructure Committee and the Environmental Committee as I believe the two kind of go hand in hand. But I'll leave that to a later discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Scholes. When it comes to environmental aspects in forestry, it's inevitable. There's a tension that happens, and then polarization that occurs. And so, one of the things I would like to really do is, what can we do to sort of bridge that? And one of the really neat things that happened at that tour is the cutting edge, the innovative thinking from an environmental perspective that the community forest has. The community does not know that. I didn't know that. And so we went through the forest and saw some really cool practices that the community forest is going far beyond the requirements in addressing various environmental aspects. And I think there's opportunity to grow that and actually become a leader in the province because a lot of those practices are essentially discouraged and would never happen if it was a private corporation. And I think it would be really, really helpful for the community to hear that messaging. And also look at, okay, what does the community forest? Is this just about cutting down trees, creating some short-term income, some short-term jobs, because we see what's happening in the job thing, or is there something really cool that we could do with our community forest? And so let's broaden this discussion and let's really address this. And so I see this as a stepping stone. And further to Councillor Stapenhurst's concerns, we've had that dialogue before. I think this is really saying, we actually care about the environmental committee, these people that have stepped up in providing their time to think things a little bit deeper and provide input. And I think that's the kind of thing that can really invigorate the environmental community. Thanks.
Any other comments? Councillor Cherry, then Councillor O'Neill.
Thanks, Mayor Sauls. I'm having a bit of an issue with this one. Part of my issue is that RCFC has been an industry leader in the forestry practices, from the commercial thinning to their regenerative forest practices. And what was very apparent, or what seemed apparent to me, was when we were on that tour with RCFC Council and Wildtight, is that it's really the province that mandates the amount that has to be cut. Like you mentioned, if we do not cut it, we are fined, and if we are continually fined, we will lose that license.
Right.
It'll then go out to tender, another company will come in and it will be cut however they feel. And if we take a look across the valley there, we can see the type of clear cuts that are happening when another corporate entity is the one leading that charge. My fear here is that is not, that type of knowledge is not shared by everybody in the industry, or as well as potentially the environmental committee. Where again, we're gonna find RCFC and city council being targeted.
Right.
When it's provincial mandates that label everything that must be done. So I do understand where you're coming from, but I do find it hard to wrestle with. Just as the last comment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Orlando, do you have a comment?
Your worship, just for clarity and sorry for gapping for a minute there, the referral on hand is the motion is to refer it to the Environmental Advisory Committee for comment, is that?
Not exactly.
No.
No, it's to share the letter for their input on environmental concerns.
To the Environmental Advisory Committee?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so generally, your worship, council advisory committees receive referrals from council on questions where maybe they have advisory input. So we get a letter or we have a question we want to deal with, we've got a project going on, we'll refer it out to them to provide comment on it. And we can't prejudge what they would say. We don't know what their comment's going to be. Certainly the letter in question has a lot of technical details, a lot of stuff I'm not familiar with. And I do not know what they would come back and say. They would not necessarily, be on one side or the other. Wouldn't even conceive of it that way. It's more like maybe they have some advice and insight to us. So I have no problem with referring to them, and that's what advisory committees are there for. And I do agree with Councillor Stapenhurst in the sense that if we don't refer anything and they don't have any items on their agenda, then the why are the committees there if they're not something to do. So I'm happy to refer it out to them and see what they want to say. I don't know what that'll be.
Any other comments from council? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Note that everyone's in favor with the exception of Mayor Sauls, as previously stated. All right, going to move on to communications, Public Art Committee minutes. Councillor Cherry, do you want to weigh in on that?
I do. Double meeting day for me. We had an update from the Wind Phone project. The Hospice Society is currently exploring an alternate location for the Wind Phone project. Unfortunately, what was originally considered is not available. There was new committee members at the meeting. So there was a quick brief intro with everybody. And then the conversation turned to artwork for City Hall. As part of the new renovations at City Hall, a piece of public art is being considered by the Finance Department, and the city's lead Indigenous liaison will coordinate the proposal, call, and work with public art committees to review the submissions.
Okay. Any comments or questions regarding those minutes? Seeing none, moving on to APC, Councillor Cherry.
Thank you, Worship. Just let me load it up here. Got it. Again, same day, about an hour before the other meeting. We saw a number of rezoning applications that I would like to jump
Short-term
into.
rentals or something?
More than that, sir.
Okay.
Your Worship. I'm just gonna go through them one by one.
Sure.
If my computer is gonna let me. So there is one out in the Big Eddy where a project is potentially being rezoned from RR04 special low density residential to R28 to facilitate a future Bearland strata that will contain 8 units of housing. Do encourage everyone to take a look at it.
Yeah.
The next one was to rezone a portion of the land from CSRD bylaw 85. Thomas Brook neighborhood, 851 residential rural hectare. Wow, it's a mouthful.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And this basically is a small lot Oh, no, that's McGinnis Road. So on Camosi Road.
Yeah, so there's a number on McKinnis and Camosi, some of them being short-term rentals in the future in the Thomas Brook neighborhood, as that being a usable, allowable use. The committee was in favor of all except the McKinnis property.
Okay.
I do apologize, all my notes on this were on my personal computer, not my. So, okay.
Good. Councilor Stapleton, you have your hand up?
Yes, sir. Maybe just a way of comment through the chair to staff. It would be great to see in the reports, sorry, 1 second. In these communications, when we click on the individual reports, to see the hyperlink attached to it. Not only for the sake of council, but also for those in the public that are following along and they want to try to find these reports and see where the development is, where the redevelopment is. It's just would, I think, greatly help a lot of people find the information that they're looking for. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from council regarding APC? Seeing none, we are going to move on to questions from the press. Ms. Delasal, do we have any questions?
There are no questions from the press, Your Worship.
All right, thank you. All right, council, I'd like to have a motion to go in camera pursuant to section 90.1 E and K of the community charter. Councilor Orlando, Councilor Devlin, all in favor? Motion is carried. We'll take a brief break and be back in camera in 10 minutes.
26 and 436.
Sorry, guys.